All right, today we're going to talk about a true legend, the M1918 Browning Automatic Rifle. Now, this isn't just a story about a piece of hardware. It's about an invention that literally broke stalemates, created a whole new kind of soldier, and left a massive mark on the 20th century.
But to really get the bar, you have to understand the problem it was built to solve. I want you to picture the Western Front in World War I. For years, the war had just been this brutal, static meat grinder. So how do you break that deadlock when the very ground you're standing on is designed to kill you? So let's start with that core problem, the trenches, an absolute tactical nightmare that really defined the entire Great War.
Okay, so think about what a soldier had to work with. On one hand, you've got your standard infantryman with his trusty bolt-action rifle. Slow, but reliable. On the other end of the spectrum, you have these massive water-cooled machine guns. I mean, they were devastating on defense, but they needed a whole crew to operate and were basically impossible to move under fire. This created this huge, deadly gap right in the middle. And trying to cross no man's land? Yeah, that was pretty much a suicide mission.
Solving a problem like that, well, it required a whole new way of thinking. And that thinking came from one of history's most brilliant firearms designers, a guy named John Moses Browning.
And this, right here, this was his whole philosophy. He understood that a weapon's real value wasn't just its rate of fire, but how usable it was in the hands of a single soldier under insane pressure. He was all about reliability, simplicity, and empowering that individual fighter. And the weapon he created because of that philosophy, wow, it would go on an incredible journey that spanned the entire globe and defined conflict for decades. So it arrived a little late to the party in World War I, but boy, it made an immediate impact. Then, you fast forward to the 1930s, and it famously ends up in the hands of both lawmen and some of the most notorious gangsters of the era. It became the absolute backbone of the American infantry squad in World War II and was still serving with distinction all the way through the Korean War. That is just an incredible service life.
So what was the secret sauce? What made this thing so special? Let's break it down and really see why it became such a battlefield icon.
This is the crucial concept right here. Walking fire. Before the bar, if you wanted suppressive fire, you were stuck in a fixed position. The bar allowed one single soldier to get up, walk towards the enemy, and lay down a curtain of lead, all by himself. I mean, this was a revolutionary idea. It completely changed infantry tactics overnight. And this table just shows you perfectly the sweet spot the BAR filled. Look at that. It wasn't as light as a rifle, sure, but it brought nearly the same firepower as a heavy machine gun, a weapon that weighed over 5 times as much and needed a whole crew. It was the perfect compromise. And its dominance really came down to these 3 things. 1, it was portable enough for a single soldier. 2, its select fire feature meant you could pop off single shots for accuracy, or just flip a switch and go full auto to suppress the enemy. And 3, it was a Browning design, which meant it was tough, dependable, and it just kept working no matter what. In the hands of a GI, this thing became the heart of the squad. It laid down suppressive fire so your buddies could move up, it led the charge as the point man's lead slinger, and it was the go-to tool for cracking open stubborn enemy positions. It really was more than just a gun. It was a soldier's companion. But then the story takes this wild turn back on the home front. That same firepower that terrified enemy soldiers was suddenly coveted by outlaws like Clyde Barrow. His gang used stolen BARs to completely outgun law enforcement during their infamous crime spree. And that's what cemented the BAR's place, not just in military history, but in American folklore.
So what is the BAR's lasting legacy? Well, its influence fundamentally changed what we expect from infantry weapons, even today.
The impact is crystal clear. The role the BAR created, a portable, one-man automatic support weapon, is now a standard part of every single modern infantry squad. Today's squad automatic weapon, or SAW, is the direct descendant of the BAR and that walking fire doctrine it pioneered. Over 50 years. Just think about that for a second. In a century defined by unbelievably rapid technological change, John Browning's design was so effective, so reliable, and so ahead of its time that it officially served American forces for more than half a century. That is just incredible. Which, it leaves us with this one last question. Is it just about being the best at one thing, or is it about being the right tool at the right time? A tool that's so fundamentally good it changes the rules for everyone who comes after.
For the BAR, I think the answer is pretty clear. It wasn't just a machine, it was an icon, forged in the crucible of war.
This is our entire source for today. Seriously, that's the whole thing. Just 4 words.
And you might be thinking, what are we supposed to do with that? It just looks like a label. But we're going to treat this thing like a tiny linguistic artifact, a puzzle box just packed with hidden clues. Yup, our whole investigation hinges on these 4 little words. We're going to do a full-on forensic analysis and see what kind of story is encoded in this tiny fragment. So let's start breaking it down.
Okay, first up, let's tackle the formal name. This is the official identifier, and it's got 2 really distinct parts we can dig into. Let's start with M2. Right away, that letter-number combo screams model designation. The M probably stands for model, and the 2, well, that tells you this is the second version of something. And that is a huge clue. Because you can't have an M2 without an M1 coming first. It tells us there's a history here, a story of development, of improvement.
And then there's Browning. Now, that's a proper name. It points to an origin story. Could be the inventor, could be the company that makes it, maybe even a place. Whatever it is, it attaches a legacy, a specific identity. This isn't just any old M2, it's a Browning M2. That name carries weight.
Put them together, M2 Browning, and what you have is a perfect example of formal nomenclature. You know, it's that kind of rigid naming system you find in science, or the military, or engineering. It's designed for precision, for catalogs, and instruction manuals. Definitely not for everyday small talk. But see, our source doesn't just stop at the official stuff. It gives us this little window into a much more personal, informal world. Let's pull apart this nickname, Deuce. Deuce, well, that's pretty easy, right? It's just slang for the number 2. It's a clever, casual callback to the M2. But now that's interesting. It brings up all these feelings of something maternal, familiar, maybe a little old school. It has this vibe of being super reliable, like an old friend you can always count on.
And that really gets at the power of a nickname. The fact that Deuce even exists tells us something huge, that this thing is used by a group of people so often, so closely, that they've given it a term of endearment. It has a personality now. It's gone from being just a piece of equipment to being a character in their lives.
So we have the formal name and the informal one. But our source gives us one last set of clues, and they've been hiding in plain sight this whole time, the punctuation that ties it all together. The grammar here is actually telling a story. Check it out. First, you've got the parentheses. That tells us that Deuce is extra info, something supplemental. Then, the single quotes inside get even more specific. They signal that this isn't just any random tidbit. It's a nickname. This structure creates a really clear hierarchy. M2 Browning is the official title, and Deuce is its famous but unofficial handle. All right, let's pull it all together. After all that detective work, what have we actually figured out from just 4 words and a couple of punctuation marks? Well, we can infer that we're dealing with some kind of technical object, right? It's a version 2 model, it's got a legacy tied to the name Browning, and we know it's used so much by a certain group that it's earned this affectionate nickname. But look at what we don't know. We still have no clue what this thing is, or what the M1 was like, or what it's for, or who these people are that use it. Our little source reveals a fascinating story, but it's definitely not the whole picture. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that even in a tiny scrap of text, you can find a surprisingly rich story. The tension between that formal, technical name and the warm, familiar nickname, it shows us 2 worlds at once, the cold world of official design and the very human world of experience. It just proves that a name is never, ever just a name. And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. We just unpacked a whole lot of meaning from 4 simple words. It really makes you wonder, if a name can hold this much story, what other tiny details, what other labels and titles are we just walking past and ignoring every single day? What stories are they just waiting to tell us? I'm talking about a piece of engineering that was literally forged in a crisis and then just refused to quit for over half a century. We're talking about the M1917 Browning Machine Gun. Okay, just picture this for a second. You're in the middle of a battle, right? Everything is on the line. And that one tool, the one piece of gear you're counting on to protect you and your buddies, it just quits on you, stops working. What do you even do then?
Well, believe it or not, that terrifying thought wasn't just some hypothetical nightmare for the US Army when they were getting ready to jump into World War I.
No, this was a real, and I mean deadly serious problem they were staring right in the face.
And that right there brings us to the first part of our story. We're calling it a desperate need because honestly, that's what it was. The United States was staring down the barrel of a full-blown machine gun crisis.
So here's the deal. The machine guns the US had in its arsenal, well, they just weren't cut out for the brutal industrial-scale fighting of World War I. Not even close. You see, a lot of them were these complicated air-cooled designs that just couldn't take the heat. Literally. They'd jam up at the worst possible time, they'd overheat and fail, and honestly, they were just plain unreliable. When your whole strategy depends on suppressive fire, your guns becoming a liability, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
But just when things looked pretty grim, the solution to this whole crisis came from a man who was, and I'm not exaggerating, already a living legend. We're talking about John Moses Browning, the genius behind the gun.
And look, calling this guy a genius isn't just hyperbole. It's pretty much the historical consensus. He wasn't just good. To this day, many will tell you he was the single greatest firearms inventor the world has ever or will ever know. I mean, his track record is just staggering. We're talking legendary pistols, game-changing automatic rifles, shotguns that completely pioneered new tech. And his secret sauce? It was this incredible mastery of mechanical simplicity. He made things that were so simple, they were practically foolproof. So what happens when you point that kind of genius at America's massive machine gun problem? Well, you get something that was nothing short of an unstoppable machine. This wasn't just an improvement, it was a total revolution in reliability. Now, to really get why this was such a huge deal, you gotta understand a key idea: sustained fire. It's exactly what it sounds like, the ability of a weapon to just keep firing and firing and firing without overheating or having a mechanical meltdown. In the trenches of World War I, if your side could do that and the other couldn't, that was a massive, massive advantage.
So Browning's solution was one of those things that's so simple, it's absolutely genius. Water cooling. Here's how it worked. The barrel was wrapped in a jacket filled with water. As the gun fires, all that intense heat gets soaked up by the water. The water then turns to steam and vents out, taking the heat with it. It's basically a radiator for a machine gun, constantly keeping the barrel cool no matter how much you fire. And the proof? Oh, the proof is just incredible. During an Army endurance test back in 1917, Browning's new gun fired, get this, 20,000 rounds, continuously, without a single failure. Let that sink in. Not one jam, not one hiccup. This wasn't just better, it was a level of reliability that people at the time could barely even wrap their heads around. Okay, so with that kind of mind-blowing performance under its belt, the M1917 was way more than ready. It was time for it to be forged in battle, and trust me, it was about to dominate the battlefield for a long, long time. And what's just wild is how long this thing stayed in the fight. I mean, look at this timeline. It shows up late to the party in World War I, but it's decisive. Then it becomes the absolute go-to workhorse for the infantry in World War II. It's still there, trusted by the troops freezing in Korea. And then, you're not going to believe this, the same basic design is still in service decades later in Vietnam. Incredible. So, that incredible longevity brings us to our final section, a lasting legacy. Because this was, without a doubt, the gun that just lived on. But the thing is, the M1917's design didn't just survive, it evolved. You had the original, the water-cooled M1917. It was a beast, kind of heavy, perfect for digging in and setting up a defense with that unmatched sustained fire. But then, you get its direct descendant, the famous M1919. It took that same super reliable core design, but swapped the water jacket for a lighter air-cooled barrel. Suddenly, it was more mobile, more versatile, and perfect for slapping onto a Jeep or a tank. So, when you boil it all down, what's the M1917's real impact? Well, for starters, it completely rewrote the rulebook on what a reliable machine gun was supposed to be. Its core design was so good, so brilliant, that it was influencing new weapons for more than 50 years. And beyond that, it really became a powerful symbol of American engineering and industrial might. And that really leaves us with one last big thought. How does a single piece of engineering, something born out of a moment of total crisis, go on to shape technology for what? The better part of a century? It's just a powerful reminder, that sometimes the simplest, most elegant solution to a really tough problem can end up echoing for generations.